We are at 7 o'clock. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the regular City Council meeting for Minnetrista, February 3rd, 2020. Our first order of business is I'd like to ask that you join me in Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So again, welcome everyone, also those of you that are watching on YouTube later on. And first, I'd like to just friendly reminder, if you have cell phones, electronic devices, please turn them off or on airplane mode or on silent. So next we are going to do introductions. And normally we start on that end or we start in the middle. So tonight we're going to switch it up and we're going to start with our Chief of Police. Our Chief of Police, Paul Falls, is on the end there. Next to him is our attorney, Ron Batty with Kennedy and Graven. And then David Abel, who is our Community Development Director. Brian Grimm, next to David, is our Finance Director. And Mike Barone is our City Administrator. I'm Lisa Whalen. I'm the Mayor. And to my left, our council members, Pam Mortenson, Mike Molitor, John Tschumperlin, Shannon Bruce, and then on the end we have Alyson Fauske, welcome back, who is our city engineer with WSB, and then we have our city clerk, Kris Linquist, and our public works superintendent, Gary Peters. We have a couple of consultants with us tonight too, and we will be introducing them as they come forward. So again, thank you for joining us. With that, we move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? If none, then is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented in our packets?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Mortenson made that motion and Mr. Tschumperlin seconded that. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Our first item is a special presentation. It's a Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, or the CAFR Award, again, for another year. How many years does that make?
Since 2004, so
All
I
right.
try to count on my fingers.
I'm not 16.
So, I don't know, 15, 60, I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, great. Do you want to?
Yeah, so I thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So this is, as the Mayor said, we've received this award since 2004. We received it again here for our 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Each year, cities have the opportunity to submit their financials to the Government Finance Officers Association, reviewed for this award, and then the GFOA, I guess the acronym for the Government Finance Officers, awards this to the cities. Our certificates whose annual reports meet those highest standards of government accounting and financial reporting. Seems like, I don't know if they got more submissions this year. It seemed like they were a little slower getting it out this year, seeing when we're in 2020 now and we're getting our 2018 award. But that's just, we just got notification, you think you saw in the packet in January here, of getting the award here. So they send us now little pins instead. So I was going to pull the plaque off the wall, but then sometimes I've had trouble getting it back up. So I just got the pin that goes on to the plaque for 2018. So they used to send a plaque each year. Now they've gone the last several years to just a pin. I think it's probably a little economical for them to, instead of shipping a big plaque every year, to send a pin with some documentation or whatever. So, but I'd like to thank them. I don't want to forget here before we move on here. My staff, Angie Bowl, who's our associate accountant, and Don Muchko, who's our utility billing specialist, they help a ton with getting ready for the audit, and we wouldn't be able to get that award without their help. So I'd like to thank them as well as the City Council for being supportive of going out for this award each year, which actually does have the benefit of our audit is, there's 20, 30 some additional pages, or give or take, of information that goes into the, some of the requirements by the GFOA as far as, so there is additional information, more things for people to peruse, read over, I guess, based on going for the awards. So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to you and Ms. Bowl and Ms. Motzko. I know it's a little extra work, so it's a great thing to do because it does add a little more transparency as well. So congratulations. Keep up the good work. Thank you. All right. So now we'll move on to, we don't have anybody signed up under persons to be heard, so we'll move on to consent agenda items. Are there any that you wish to remove?
I'd like to remove the work session meeting minutes, item A.
Okay. Any other one?
And I'd like to remove E, the resolution to approve judges.
Okay. All right. So we have remaining approve our City Council regular meeting minutes from January 21st, 2020. C is approve our closed session minutes from January 21st, 2020. And D is a resolution to approve claims. And F is a resolution to approve a front yard setback variance at 945 Maple Crest Drive. Any questions? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve B, C, D, and F?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Mortenson made that motion and Mr. Tschumperlin seconded that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Mr. Molitor, we'll start with A.
Okay, on the work session meeting minutes, in our discussion about the financing, I'd like to make sure it's reflected that I made the comment that the financing of the fire truck implicitly assumes that the payments that would continue after the building is paid off would be put towards the fire truck, and pretty much ties our hands on part of this issue.
On what page are you on?
Yeah.
Councilmember Molitor.
Do you know what page?
It's in the discussion. Let me
Okay.
just find there's nothing there that I would be asking to add
Right,
this to it.
but as in a reference point of where you wanted in the minutes of.
Yeah, I wasn't. Let me get there.
Page 11, it looks like.
It looks like
11,
Mount Fire
12.
Advisory Commission
Yeah.
Finance discussion was starting on page 11.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much. Let's see. There's probably in right after the paragraph or part of the paragraph, starting with there was discussion on the $60,000 2020 drawn down.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, could you please repeat what you wanted noted in there?
The financing of the fire truck implicitly assumes that the payments for the bond issue will continue after the building is paid off by having the bond issue payments spike dramatically at that time.
Okay, did you say that at the meeting?
I said statements to that effect.
Okay, I'll have to go back and review it.
We can pull it, but I know I
Because
said
I
statements.
can't.
Why don't we do this? We won't approve them tonight. Go back and re-listen to it, and then put, because I understand what you're saying. He had made some comments to that regard.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
just want
okay.
those reflected.
Yep, and I have no problem doing that, but I don't believe
Yeah,
that's the
fine.
exact what you
I
said,
don't
so.
Yeah.
have the exact
Okay.
language. I just know I made that statement to that
Okay.
effect.
And then we'll bring those back at the next meeting.
That's fine.
All right.
Sounds great.
Next, we have Ms. Bruce. You had approved the election judges. You removed that?
Yes, and just because you have a deceased person on the list.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I
Elroy
forgot to
Goodwin.
take him off.
Yep.
Elroy.
And
I
that
will
was the
take
other
that.
one.
I will take him off. I just took the list because we can only use for the PNP. We can only use the 2018 approved list, and so I just grabbed it, and
Yep.
so thank you for that.
All right. So is there a motion to approve the list with, I'm not sure which individual you're taking off.
Elroy Kuglin passed away,
Okay.
so I'll take him off the list.
All right, but we need to know that. So, Ms. Bruce, did you want to make a motion to approve the election judges without Mr. Kuglin?
Yes, I moved.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. So a motion has been made and seconded. Ms. Mortenson seconded that. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. So we'll move on to our business items, and this is accept bids and award the contract for the Southwest Water Tower project. I believe, Chad, you're here for that? All right. Katzenbach? Is that Katzenberg? Okay. Close. Right. Thank you for coming.
Certainly. So I'm just here to answer any questions on that particular project. As you might recall, plans and specifications were approved back in December. Project went out for bid. We opened up bids on the 23rd of January and received 3 bids from 3 different water tower contractors. They were contractors we were expecting to bid the project, and the low bidder, which was Phoenix Fabricators, we're somewhat familiar with. They're currently working on 2 other water tower projects that SEH is currently working on that I'm taking part in. So I guess with that, I don't know if anyone had any particular questions that I can answer regarding the project.
I did have a question, and I did talk to Mike about this earlier today. On the quotes were sizably different.
They were. They definitely were. Mm-hmm.
So, and the biggest portion I noticed was the site grading.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of explain why that might have happened?
Sure. So I think it really comes down to which site contractors the water tower contractors were choosing. And my knowledge of the project, of who they were looking at, who they were picking, the contractor who was low bid was using a site contractor that they've previously used on other projects. So I would venture to guess that they're familiar with them, they know what to expect, and they got some pretty nice prices. If you look at the 2 other bidders who were hired, you look at the unit price items, they kind of jump around. There's not really any consistency from one to the next. So my guesstimation was they didn't get a particular contractor to sharpen their pencil, if you will, when it came to that site work.
So the site work, it's done by a subcontractor.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that the Phoenix Fabricators, they're the ones that are the contractor.
They're the prime contractor.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
And they've worked with the subcontractor?
Correct.
And where are they located?
So Phoenix Fabricators, who's the water tower contractor, they're based out of Indiana.
The subcontractor, I'm thinking.
The subcontractor is based out of Buffalo, Minnesota.
Okay. Is there maybe that's why there was such a big difference? Are they more local than the other ones?
I think some of the other subcontractors that the other contractors are listing are also local, but it just seemed to me that they weren't offering up very competitive prices.
Okay. All right. So the other question I have is, so you say you have worked with Phoenix Fabricators and some of their subcontractors before?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Because obviously we've had a situation, and I think our staff mentioned this to you, that we had a situation before where we went with the low bidder, and because they were the low bidder on a project and ended up with significant issues, we really don't want to go down that road again. So I'm a little, I think Ms. Mortenson is probably same here. Maybe all of us are. We don't want to go with the lowest bid just because it's the lowest bid. We want to make sure that this contractor is reputable and actually will get the work done in a reasonable time frame, as well as stay on budget.
Certainly.
Maybe I have a question for Mr. Batty. So, by law, we're required to go with the lowest bidder, responsible bidder.
Yes.
Can you? So, what if? I'm not saying we're going to do this, but what if we didn't go with this lowest bidder for some reason or other? Would there be some repercussions?
Yes.
Okay.
What the council is required to do, not only in this context, but any competitive bidding, the bidder has to be responsive, which means they have to propose to build what it is you want, and secondly, they have to be responsible, and that's the piece that you're now questioning. I guess there is a presumption that bidders are responsible unless there's some pretty strong evidence to the contrary. I think what often comes up when you see a big gap in numbers like this, the question is, what's going on? Who missed something? And that's part of the reason the engineers go over the bids pretty carefully, right, to make sure that there hasn't been a mathematical error or something hasn't been missed, because sometimes that does happen. and you want to catch that kind of stuff. I think in this case, they verify that there doesn't seem to be any problem in the bid. The good news is the bid's about $100,000 less than the engineer's estimate, so that's probably to the city's advantage. I would say that absent some pretty convincing evidence that these folks aren't responsible, then the council needs to award the bid to them if you're going to award the bid at all.
Okay.
And so I'd like to feel that both Brian and I, being here the number of years that we have, could anticipate questions like this from our council members. And so on the day of the bid opening, Kris brought back to my office the sheet that you see in your packet item. So our first thought was, is this RAM 2.0? We don't want to go down that road. So both Brian and I, at different times actually, came in and talked with Chad and his other person that was here with him. I forget his name right now, another engineer with SEH. And we said exactly the questions that I got on the phone with the people I talked with today about why is there such a difference? Because we all know what happened with RAM. So even before the calls today, I had talked with Chad via email a couple times saying you should be ready to answer any questions that the council may have about the vendor and the subcontractor because of our past experiences with our road construction. I know they're still engineering-based projects, but these guys seem fairly different than our last contractor. For instance, I think Gary was looking them up. Phoenix has been around 35, 40 years and has been in the business. Chad mentioned that they do a lot of composite takes, including, I believe, the two that he's working on with them here in Minnesota. I don't know if you don't mind saying which cities they were. I can't recall.
Sure. They're just put a tank online for Brainerd, Minnesota.
Right, so I thought it was Brainerd.
And then there's one currently under construction for Cambridge that I'm working on.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Other area tanks they've recently finished would be Wyoming, north on 35. They're currently under construction in Moorhead, and they just finished one in West Fargo as well.
So they're not unfamiliar with our climate and our area. They've worked in the field for quite a while. Chad's worked with them for a number of projects ongoing and just completed. The subcontractors, same thing. They've been around for quite a while. So can I sit here with any certainty and say we're going to have no problems with this? No, but I think, as Mr. Batty just mentioned, that barring anything that we should have found out from the engineering, we're not hearing it, that I think to go with the lowest bidder, responsible bidder, is the thing to do tonight. And thankfully, it's low enough where it's actually below the engineer's estimate. So I think that's a positive. But,
Right.
I guess we'll only find out as we go forward.
As we go forward, right.
But I think based on what we know tonight, I think that's the thing to do. So.
I do have one question. So on page 52 of our packet, the tabulation of bids, it lists item by item, and there's 44 items. I believe, since it says SH letterhead on it, that you probably put together that list of 44. Is that fair?
Correct, yep.
Okay. So my question is, on item 44, is a 500,000 gallon composite elevated water storage tank and all associated components not listed on the bid form. And that number is anywhere between 1.7 million and 2.3. Effectively, that's like it's like you've got 44 items, and 1 through 43 is 10%, and 90% is lumped into one. Now, I get the second part where you're saying all associated components are listed on the bid form. I kind of see that as that's your catch-all, right? You want to have that. But it just seems a little bit odd, and this kind of goes to this question that we all have about this, is that isn't there some way you can break that down on a bid, or why isn't that broken down a little bit more granular so that we see a little more detail there?
Sure. Now, when we bid it out, we typically, when we look at the tank, that's one complete unit and everything that's basically inside of it. And every contractor has a little bit different design. So in order to kind of facilitate those bidding numbers, we do the water tower itself as a lump sum. Now, when we move into the project and we actually are preparing like a bid form, we'll have them break out a schedule of values, and they'll break out the tank by concrete and steel and appurtenances, whatever. There'll be a dozen categories will be broken out.
And we're expecting a dozen to match in total what's the...
Yeah, it will match what's in total there for the water tower number.
Well, it would have to match, right?
Yes, it has
I mean,
to.
it has to, yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, some engineers choose to actually do the whole project as a lump sum, including the site work. With as much site work as there is involved, we broke it out unit price by unit price.
I had a question on the item number 1, traffic control. That one was a lot more than the other two bidders. For some reason, it was $12,000 versus $2,300, and I'm just curious. Do you know why that was so much higher on this bidder than the other two?
Not 100% certain. It could be how they're handling. He may have had to hire someone to take care of that piece. It could be just a way that they needed to put expenses, and it landed there. It's purely speculation as far as why it's higher than the other.
So we don't have the bidding process is just you open the bids and you take the one that's the lowest bidder. You can't go back and negotiate with them on anything. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. So
Okay.
we've got the bid numbers. Now,
Well,
it could be a portion, an extra 10 feet of water main, something like that doesn't get installed. Well, you wouldn't pay for that. You only pay for what actually gets built and installed.
so if they don't use all 12,000 for traffic control, they wouldn't bill us for 12,000.
Well, that particular piece, I think, is probably a lump sum item.
Okay.
So
So it might include more than just traffic control. I mean, it might be, who knows?
yeah, it's
Mhm.
probably a catch-all for whatever it's going to take for them to control traffic when they do the water main connection, if they have any other temporary signage,
Oh,
barriers,
okay.
those sorts of things.
It kind of somewhat offsets to the next line, mobilization, which is another generic bucket that I've learned being the council. So mobilization means a lot of different things.
Right.
And so you see they're quite a bit lower, 35 to,
Yeah.
70-some thousand, 80,000 lower. So what somebody might lump in the traffic control bucket on the other ones may have got lumped into mobilization. Or it's kind of,
Yeah.
as it says lump sum, it's okay.
Yeah, it's really up to the contractor how they, where they weight things, where
Right.
they put their costs and so on.
My only, a big concern is they only have 10,000 for the site grading. Is there a possibility that and the other one was 40,000 and the other one was over 200,000. So is there any possibility that they would come back and want more money for that? And if so, what would warrant a change?
And really, the only change I could see would be if we're asking them to do something that wasn't in the plans.
Okay.
And I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Well, I think we're glad it came in under the estimate or under the what we thought to be the budget, so that's good. Council, what is your wish?
I guess the only other comment I'll make on this is to your point about the site grading and any other item for that matter. Just given the magnitude of the difference on the bids, I think any change that we would see would probably come through, would come through as a chain order.
Right.
You could do a lot of change orders with this contractor and still end up being under
Right.
what the other ones are.
Yeah.
So, not that I'm going to say that's the way we're going to go, but it gives me some, because the other ones could be done and still require change orders on those as well. So
Exactly. No, I
so
understand,
think,
yeah.
I'm a little hesitant when I see $10,000 on the site work. I'm like, can't even get a Bobcat out there for that, but okay.
All right. All right, so we're looking for a motion then to accept the bids and award the contract for the Southwest Water Tower to Phoenix, what is it called now? Phoenix Fabricators and Erectors in the amount of $2,288,500.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Are there any other questions or discussion? Hearing none.
Sorry. I don't have a problem with awarding this contract to this low bidder. I'm going to be voting no on this because I'm not confident in how we're going to pay for this yet. And I think when we award a contract to a bidder, you ought to be comfortable with how you're going to pay for that contract. And that's
Okay.
just
All
wanted
right.
to explain that.
Sure. Thank you. All right. So any other comments or questions? Otherwise, hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Bruce dissenting. So that moves us into the next item, which is the, first of all, it's the reimbursement resolution for the 2020 A bonds. Mr. Grimm?
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, this starts on page 54 in the City Council packet, and this is more the standard resolution for when we're planning on doing any type of bonding and financing. You'll see there that in the memo, it would if you go to page 55, the resolution talks about the city proposing to undertake the following: a construction of a water tower, about $2.5 million, acquisition of various items of capital equipment, which was our 2020 budgeted capital equipment purchases of $232,500. I guess at the work session, it was talked about whether we would potentially bond for something a little less from the water tower. So whether that number, I think the reimbursement resolution is a maximum. So I guess we could leave that, or we could, if council wants to, we can change that to $2 million or some other number, I guess, or whatever. But these are just the standard resolutions to state that we want to reimburse ourselves for some of these items that we've, I guess, A, just entered into a contract on the one item, and B, budgeted for the equipment purchases. So stand for any questions from council.
So the reimbursement would be for any of the costs regarding the water tower, and until we receive the funds after the bond is done. And we also at the work session discussed not bonding for the total of the equipment certificates, if I'm correct. So the total we were going to bond for.
I think what we were, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I think where we ended up was we do the certificates, but we take down the bond issue.
Okay, so the $500 for the certificates remains, but the bond issue, the water tower will only be the $2 million. Okay, so so it would still be a total of $202.5 million for reimbursement, or some of the expenses haven't taken place.
Correct. We've done the equipment or certificates for 2019 and 18. We've done the reimbursement resolutions for those in February of 19 and 18. So what this resolution was doing was just stating that to add in the 2020 amounts, which is up. I mean, this is up to a maximum amount. So
I think what we would get to here is that on page 55, if we're all in agreement or we want to move forward here, so when we start listing here, number 1, the city proposes to undertake the following: the construction of a water tower. I believe that number would go from 2.5 down to 2, and then item B would remain as listed here.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Because we've already done the ones for 2018 and
Right.
19. So,
Okay.
So yep, I think that's correct, as Mr. Molitor stated.
Okay, so it'd be actually
$2,232,500, I guess,
Yeah.
added together. Yes.
Right, okay. All right. I just want to be real clear so the minutes reflect the correct numbers. All right. All right, any other questions?
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, so then what would be the total number? Because the way I understood it, it was $2.5 million is what we would be bonding for, including the equipment certificates.
Yeah, so first of all, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but first of all, this is a reimbursement. So the reimbursement that we're going to do is $2,232,500. That's the reimbursement that we're doing. The bonding that we're considering is 2.5. We don't have to reimburse ourselves for the previous ones because that reimbursement resolution has already occurred.
Okay, so it's just the reimbursement for the
2020 items, basically the water tower and the equipment certificate for 20.
$2,288,500. Is that what we're reimbursing?
No, it's
No.
going to be $2 million. So if you go to page 55, just make 1A there 2 million, leave 1B the same at 232,500, and ultimately the amount is 2,232,500 in point 2 there, or
Right.
number 2 there.
So we're basically this is the resolution number 017-2020. Basically, all we're doing is changing A from 2.5 million down to 2 million.
Okay.
Yep, and
And the
2
rest stays.
Yeah. Well, 2, I guess, would be the math. It would be would change
The 2.2.
instead of
I'll just get
It
together
says-
with you, Brian, afterward.
It says
tomorrow, and
232.
We'll figure it.
That's B. You're talking about 2.
B, number 2.
Look at number 2.
Oh, number 2, I'm sorry, yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you add the 2 million plus the 232, so it'll be 2,232,500. Is this going to be 500,000 less?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right. So is there a motion then? This is to a reimbursement motion, which we need if we want to reimburse ourselves for the expenses.
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. So a motion has been made by Mr. Molitor and seconded by Ms. Bruce, as we discussed, for the reimbursement. Any further questions? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So now we'll move on to the resolution providing for the sale. And now in our packet it says nearly 3.1 million general obligation bonds. So Mr. Hagan is with us this evening from Ehlers and Associates, and just kind of FYI. So at our work session, we talked about a lot of different things, but we did focus a lot on the 2 different bonds. We talked about a revenue bond, and we talked about a general obligation bond. And maybe just for the audience, if you will, if you could explain the difference between a revenue bond and what we call a GO bond, and what the cost differences are, and some of what our discussion revolved around.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Todd Hagan from Ehlers and Associates, the city's municipal advisor. We assist the city in selling the bonds then for the water tower project and the reimbursement of the equipment certificates and for the new equipment that's coming online in 2020. So we did have some discussions at the work session, the difference between a general obligation bond and a revenue bond on the water portion of the bond issue. And the general obligation pledge, it's in your pre-sale packets, and it is a bond that's got the full faith and credit and taxing powers behind the bond itself. The bond's primarily payable from utility revenues, the water utility, but it's got an extra pledge behind it for security for the bondholders that it will be paid, and it will be paid by water revenues or taxes if necessary, and taxes only on a temporary basis. For the water project, state law only allows us being the city to use taxes on a temporary basis if we need to. Before that ever happens, there's a fund balance in the water fund also that would be used to help while we would ramp up the rates and charges if we needed to. So with that, we're able to bundle the two, the equipment certificates and the water revenue bonds, into one bond issue, one general obligation bond issue that we can get rated, again, on the full faith and credit and taxing powers of the city and not the water revenues. So that will lower the interest rate quite considerably. You have a AA plus credit rating with Standard & Poor's, and you don't have a revenue bond rating, just a pure revenue bond rating. I don't see many of those. They're expensive. It would require, if we had one bond revenue bond and one bond general obligation bond, we'd have to split these two into two different bond issues. I suspect the smaller one would be non-rated, the equipment, and then the water rev would either be rated with a revenue rating or not rated at all. And then we'd have to probably negotiate the pure water rev bond as opposed to sending it out for competitive bids like you did the construction of the water tower and what the city has done in the past and had great success with sending a general obligation bond out into the competitive market. And with that, a utility revenue bond, just a pure revenue bond, would no doubt have a higher interest rate on it too. It's hard to quantify that. Could be 50 basis points, could be 100 basis points, which is 1% or 0.5% higher than a general obligation bond. We don't see many of those, so we don't have a lot of comparables to look at. We discussed at the work session. I do have a couple revenue bonds I'm negotiating with some municipalities, but they do still have a appropriation. The council can still appropriate some taxes to help support that bond issue before it goes in default. So, and what we don't want is a default situation, which would affect all of our bond issues and our ratings. So, to avoid that and to have a strong bond issue, I guess we recommend at Ellers and in the work session had some discussion on that to go forth with a general obligation bond for both, bundling them up and getting a credit rating. Hopefully stay at your AA plus. And so the market's hungry for all that right now. There's a lot more demand than there is supply for bonds and revenue bonds and general obligation bonds. So it's just really kind of also the difference between being able to competitively sell the bond or having to negotiate it with one underwriter. So it would take some time to do the negotiation, but it's not out of the question. It's all doable. It all works. It's just kind of however you guys want to sell the bond issues. But it has been the city's past policy and practice to finance these type of projects with this type of debt issuance. So, yeah.
Okay.
If that helped or not. So.
Any other questions for Todd? Mr. Hagan?
You want to talk a little bit about the estimated rate based on, obviously, I think one of the things just from the previous resolution is the resolution providing for the sale of 3.1 million bonds is going to be something now 2.5 something or whatever.
Yeah, we would, right. We're gonna. It's been talked that we'll apply cash, about $500,000 of cash on the water tower side of this. That would bring to an estimate, just doing the quick math, from $3,090,000 for the bond to $2,590,000, right, something like that. Probably the cost of issuance will go down a little bit because a lot of that's based on the par amount of the bond issue. So, so bond counsel and the rating agency and Ellers and the other players will come in less because our fees are in proportion to the bond issue. So the equipment certificate's a 5-year bond inside of a 20-year water revenue, geo water revenue bond. So it just is all going to be, as far as the bidders are concerned, they're just going to look at one large bond issue that goes out 20 years. Inside of that, you can see in your packet here that we do have those split out. So they are treated sort of separately as far as budgeting, right? One's payable from a tax levy, the equipment. The other one is primarily from water revenues. The rates that we're looking at, we've have a 15 basis point cushion or 0.15% because we just nobody knows what the market's going to do between now and the bond sale on March 9th. But we're looking at 2% with the 15 basis point cushion, or 2.13 or 2.15 true interest cost. And the true interest cost is what the bidders are going to bid off. We're going to tally from a true interest cost, which takes into account the interest rates, the fees that the underwriter, broker dealer is going to take, and then we actually present value that interest rate number. So they can't manipulate a bid that way. So we will show you what the true interest cost is, and again, it's going to have the underwriter fee in there, a premium, or however they want to bid it. It's going to be the true interest cost. It's going to be the rate that we're going to show you. We'll tally them up. So we'll have, and that's traditionally what we do with all our bond issues, from school districts to counties to townships to cities. So. So that will be the bidding parameters there based off the true interest cost. So In the packet, too, is a 30-year bond buyer index graph. You can see that we're at a historic low. I've mentioned that before, so it's a good time to be bonding if you need to borrow money. It should go well, and again, we will get the bond issue rated if you so choose to go with general obligation bonds. So March 9th, I'll come back at this time, and we will have those tallied up for you and just show kind of who all bid and who the best bidder is. We put it on the top so it's easy to figure out.
Do you maybe just want to outline, just as far as I just put the timeline up there, so we'd have the basically the pre-sale reports tonight, and then the information goes out to the different bidders by that week of the February 24th, correct? And then
we put together the offering material, which is like a prospectus on a stock offering called an official statement. So that goes out with the story of the bond issue. The city's financials are in there. Lots of good information for not only the bidders but for the rating agency. While we're on the rating agency call, it's about a 1-hour call, somewhere around those 2 weeks. Mike will be on with Brian and anybody else that wants to come on board and listen in on what a rating call is, but basically that's going to fill in all the blanks that they can't see from the hard numbers that we give the rating agency. They're located in Chicago, so they know the Midwest. They have analysts that are sort of familiar with different areas of the Midwest, so we tend to get the same analyst that's familiar with Minnetrista on the phone, and that can last from anywhere from a half hour to an hour of a discussion. They give us questions ahead of time, so there's really no mystery in what they're going to be asking. So they won't trip us up or anything on that, but typically that goes pretty smooth. We won't have an audit yet for 2019. But we've got some good year-end numbers and a good 2020 budget, so that's they're used to that. A lot of budgets or a lot of audits don't come out till later on in the year. So,
and then
it's basically going to be an update. Yep.
And then the sale results would be that morning of March 9th.
That morning on March 9th. Yep, they come in. Our bond sale coordinators pick a nice spot for Minnetrista in the morning, typically between 10 and noon. We're trying not to overlap with any other. We don't want to compete against ourselves. We don't want to compete against other folks in the market that are going to come crashing down at the same time we are. So we kind of try to strategically put you guys in a spot where underwriters and broker dealers and banks can take a good look at you and aren't too rushed. Then we tally that up. In the morning, I give Mike and Brian a call and let them know how the bidders stacked up, and if we want to give any, we might get a premium bid. We might get a discount bid, kind of depending on sort of who the makeup of the bond issue and who the bidder is. Probably 9 times out of 10 now we get what was called a premium bid, and that's described in your pre-sale notice, so they may actually give us more money than what we're asking for, and no money is free, right? So we typically downsize the bond issue even more, right, than the $500,000 we know we're putting in for cash right now. And really, what a premium is it's really kind of extra sort of security for a customer on the other end when they resell the bonds to the market. Rates are so low right now that they will put a higher interest rate on for you in exchange for money from the customer. In order to hold a 2% bond, it probably should be a 1% bond, right? So they actually give you premium. That's called a premium. They give you that back. I've seen premiums be millions of dollars on large bond issues, or a few $100,000 on smaller bond issues, but typically we downsize the bond by that premium, so that burns that yield down from that higher interest rate that's going to be stamped on your bonds, and just brings that down because you're borrowing less now, right? So you're taking that cash from customers and you're bringing the bond issue down. It sort of sounds like magic, but
nothing's
it
free.
Kind of still is. But that's kind of the way of the world with the low interest rates right now. It's it's however they can kind of get this all bundled up for you, and actually at the end of the day just give you the best interest rate at the end of the day. So that's why we use true interest cost, because it kind of weeds all that out, so there can't be any games can't be played within those interest rates. So it's a pretty solid way to determine the low bid through the true interest cost method. Yep, and then March 9th, I'll come back with a sale day report, and you guys can make the decision on accepting or rejecting. Most of the time you accept, just FYI. And so,
I could see if the bonds came back really the interest rate was a lot higher than we expected, then you might say, well, let's, I don't know, do it again or whatever.
Yeah, really it is what's nice about the general obligation bond bidding, it is the lowest interest cost on that day, period. It's you couldn't, get it any better than that, because you competitively bid it. So you would just be wondering, is tomorrow better? Is next week going to be better?
Yeah.
Is it? Will it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Now, typically, you go ahead and approve that because you have to finance your project. But
right.
Yeah, if I sold some bonds in 8, 9, and 10. I think it was right there in that 8 housing bubble, and I was probably the only one that sold some bonds down by Mankato. And we got one bid, and it was a high one, but they had a project they needed to sell or finance, and like in our work session we talked about, we ended up just refinancing it anyway after a few years. So we did get a lower interest rate, but you really had to kind of go forward if you wanted the project to be financed. So that was probably my only one that was teetering on the risk of just saying no to the bid. But and they really, so when we get the bids in the morning on the 9th, and I talked to Mike and Brian, and we talk about downsizing if we get a premium and all that kind of stuff, and then we reallocate all the schedules. So at the end, far right of the schedule, you saw at the work session, which is the principal and interest payment, right? We get everything level again. So if they give us some jittery interest rates and kind of some funky stuff, we can still just manipulate the principal to have the result on the right side of your payments being level. So that's kind of the beauty of that. We've got full authority in our bidding documents to do that, and they expect some adjustments on that. We don't really get any pushback. And then we call the underwriter, the winning bidder too, even before, right? You meet at night. We have to call them and say, here's what this looks like, and then they readjust it because they're calling their customers too, right? Because they're pre-selling these before we get to the council meeting that night. And so we're pretty much locking it in, and they're just kind of waiting for me then to make a phone call after like tonight's meeting, but after March 9th's meeting, then I call and say, you approved it. And so then the next morning, that underwriter, broker-dealer can go start to pre-sell immediately the next day to get everything kind of bundled up for the close somewhere around April 1st.
Okay.
So there's lots of things that need to be done quickly. And,
on that Monday, the 9th.
On that Monday, they need to go quickly, and everybody sort of in the team needs to know that because these bids are so price sensitive, it's a little bit different than a construction project. This is like moving every day. It's moving every hour. So there has to be some, so you can't, have a bid come in on a Friday, and then have them hold it over the weekend where you can make a decision on Monday. Probably the longest I've had a decision to be made is like in a county situation where county boards meet in the morning, like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And so we'll get the bids like by noon the day prior, and then they'll just hold that over and make a decision the next day in the morning. It's soon enough, and it's actually probably as far out as I've ever been on a.
Less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they need to know that we're okay or we're not okay with something as soon as possible, because they've got a lot of folks kind of waiting for answers.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, lots of information.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I have some comments to make. I don't have any other questions of Mr. Hagan, but thank you.
Thanks. Yep, thank you.
I just want to go on record to say that I'm not opposed to the water tower. I think we need it. It's something that we need to do. It's a question, from my perspective, of timing and risk, and who assumes the risk of whether or not we're going to meet the growth projections that we're anticipating. And the way I see it, a GO bond puts that risk on the backs of all the Minnetrista taxpayers if we don't hit those growth projections. And a revenue bond puts that risk on the back of the investors. I prefer the latter. And for that reason, and pretty much that reason alone, I'm going to be voting no on this tonight. If we were to be considering this in an environment, an economic environment, where we were really sure of our growth projections, like we would be maybe next November after the election, I would be a lot more open to voting for a GO bond, where the full faith and credit of the city is behind it. But right now, with what we know now, I'm not comfortable enough to do that, and for that reason, I can't vote for this tonight.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay.
On the flip side, I don't want to see people running out of water. And if we're going to pay investors, it comes out of our pockets because they're going to take the risk and they're going to get paid for it. And there's really no reason to do that. If the revenue bonds were the default, we're only kidding ourselves that only the investors would pay. The whole city would take a hit for that. So I just want to clarify that we've had issues with water in the city. It's widely known, right? This is one issue that if we get on top of it now, we can prevent this from happening. Residents have some basic requirements of city governments, and that is when they turn their faucet on, water comes out, and that's what this comes down to. And when you go to the fire hydrant and your house is on fire, the water is going to come out. And that doesn't change whether the economy's up, down, sideways, whatever. And I'm not going to put that at risk. So that's why I'll be supporting this, but with some changes that we've discussed.
Any other comments?
I would just like to add one other comment, too. I think with the revenue bonding, it limits the bidding and the competitive bidding. I think that is a huge aspect that we have to pay attention to versus doing GO bond. So,
I'd like to say,
just a minute. Mr. Tschumperlin, any?
I was going to concur with what is predominant belief here is I don't have probably the concern that Ms. Bruce has on the election, the growth. I don't see the interest issues fluctuating greatly. I do have a concern on the revenue bond, just in the ripple effect that it could have across the board for the city. And I think we can get a better interest rate with GO. So based on other changes we're going to make in the reduction of the bond issue, I'd be comfortable with staying with the GO.
Okay. All right.
I would like to say one more thing. If we were to put off this decision until we were more sure, and I'm not saying a GO bond is out of the question, I would consider that if we were more certain about our growth projections. And the water's not going to stop coming out of the faucets if we don't make this decision until November. The water's still going to flow. And we have fire suppression abilities now. That's still going to be there. There's no risk whatsoever to our citizenry for putting this off for a few more months until we're more sure of our growth projections and the economy and the direction it's going to be taking.
Well, there are several risks. One, if the economy does take a different direction, the interest rates are going to go up. So that is a risk. What happened back in 2014 and in 2015, we looked at, there was another engineering firm that did some growth projections, and they projected like 140 or more homes per year. And that's what they were projecting, and they based our long-term water infrastructure CIP plan on those projections. And much to Brian's credit and to his staff's credit, they took a look at this and they said that's way, way over the top. We don't think we're going to be meeting those kind of projections. And they ratcheted it down to 75 new homes per year over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. And with that, or whatever, 20 years. And so they're saying average, and with that, they did a long-term financial plan for our water infrastructure, and they felt that it was, with everything that we were doing, that this was a very solid plan. And I believe they worked with Ehlers and Associates also to come up with a very solid plan. And so with that, right now, we're well over the 75 homes per year. It won't necessarily continue, but even if it doesn't continue for a few years, we're more than 100 over on average per year right now. So we already have a padding. So nobody knows. We won't know even in November what the elections are going to do to the economy or to the housing market. I think we're going to have to be looking at this as we go forward. We're going to have to look on an annual basis and maybe even on a biannual basis on our water rates to make sure that they are still in keeping and that we're still on target and still on track to meet all of our obligations. That's why you have a long-term financial plan, so that you can make projections, but then you're also going to go back and you're going to reevaluate it on an annual or even biannual basis. So I feel that we will have a lot of revenue still in reserves come a rainy day, that we can use those, and we can also then, with the GO bond, we can refinance it in the future should we need to reduce our costs as well. So when you add all those things up, I feel more comfortable with the GO bond rather than putting ourselves at risk with a revenue bond. And when I say at risk, the city is at risk, and we would be risking a lot all across the board for whatever we do in the future, and even current, we would be risking our rating as well as future possibility for bonding. So I'm fine with the GO bond. We're going to reduce it over the $3 million. We're going to go down to the $2.5 million, and I think we'll be in a good situation there.
I'd like to address a couple things that I just heard, and one of them is that a revenue bond is going to hurt our bond rating. And that's only if you default on the revenue bond. So that's not necessarily true. And I also want to make a point that I asked Mr. Hagan about the difference between the revenue bond interest and the GO bond interest. And I was told at the beginning of our meeting that it was slight, pretty insignificant. So I haven't heard anything that has changed my mind.
Okay, we understand. All right. So
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 018-2020, but I'd modify the amount to reflect $2,515,000, which is $2 million for the water tower, and then the $515,000 with these certificates that has been presented. Implicit in that, and I'll make it explicit, is that the amortization schedule gets reduced pro rata based on that. So.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1, Bruce dissenting. So thank you very much. And I see Chad has already left. So with that, we'll move on to staff reports. We'll start with Mr. Barone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. I have a number of items that I'd like to go through with the council. So if you recall, back at our last council meeting, we approved a professional services agreement with WSB in the amount of $10,700 for a traffic study. Also discussed that evening was the fact that the school district was interested in, after a meeting we had prior to that meeting, of participating in that traffic study at the rate of 50% of the total amount. I did send the packet item as background material to the superintendent. Also sent him an agreement that Kennedy and Graven put together for us that spells out the terms of the 50% cost share. As I emailed with Superintendent Borg, he said their next school board meeting is Monday, March 10th, a week from tonight. So if all goes well, they should have
February
that.
10th.
February 10th,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
thank you. Okay.
February 10th. I'm looking right at it. I
Yep.
didn't say it. February 10th. And hopefully they'll sign that agreement that talks about the cost share and return it to us so we can have it for council's approval at the Tuesday, February 18th council meeting. I don't know if we were able to pull up those photographs. So if council recalls, we talked about the monuments that are out on Shady Lane and on County Road 44. So I don't know, I've got them in. There's 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. They're just numbered 1, 2, 3. One's on the east side of Shady, one's on the west side. Yeah. That's the west side of one. Yeah. And then there's one that was on 44. Gary Peters took these. I don't know if you want to discuss them a little bit. I think we talked about I think the residents were interested in saving one of them, right?
Well,
Was it the west one or the east one? You tell me.
From what I understand, they wanted to try to save at least the west one.
Yeah.
Because they know the east one's going to have to probably be moved with the excavation.
Right. That was what I
So
recall.
this is the one they wanted to try to save.
Right.
without moving it.
Without moving it.
Without
Yeah.
moving.
And
So-
this one is more in the city right away, where the other one is in Park, Three Rivers Park right away.
So I just wanted you to have the visual because I think we were all like struggling to picture this, and so it's very nice pictures, nice snowy. Probably looks a little better now with a little less snow on it, but and then the one on 44, I think Gary said the other one is
That's not
gone.
going to be impacted, though.
No,
No, that is the one they were discussing. No, that
What
was
else?
left there from the other entrance.
Yeah.
There is only one side of it left.
Right, right.
used to be an entrance there, so
Yeah, it's in an odd place.
It
but,
is.
Yeah. Okay.
okay. So I just wanted to give a visual on that.
So going back to the one on the west side.
Yeah, I guess that's number
First
2.
picture.
Yeah.
So I think some of the residents were saying that they felt this had some retaining wall value. Is it?
It is holding back. Yes, that bank does come down slightly on the back side of it.
Okay.
So
More
it's kinda
towards the
holding
center
the-
post.
it's
But
kinda
then the rest of
holding
it
the
is
road?
all just dropped behind there. It's more of it than in terms of drainage way, which flows towards Culvert, towards 44.
Okay, so in terms of what it's actually supporting more of the road, or is it supporting the hill behind it?
I'd say probably the road more than anything.
That's kind of what I thought. Okay.
If any, I mean,
Right. Okay.
I don't believe it's actually supporting the road either. It's pretty
Right.
much just there.
Probably just looks as though it is. Okay.
So if we left one of them, would that be an issue?
Pardon?
If we left one, would that be an issue? I mean,
Well, I think the council that evening said they were interested in trying to preserve as much as possible, but we already know the one on the east side of Shady has got to go because they got to excavate under it. So this was the one I think we kind of focused in on. And I think later on, somebody mentioned there's one on 44. So I just threw that
yeah.
in there to show you what it looked like. But I think this was the one I think we're going to try to save. Now there's got to be some work done to figure out what it would cost to save it and how much.
I thought they wanted to save both.
Correct, but I think the one on the east side is subject to the park
Right.
district, so.
Did they want to move
it.
They were talking
Yes,
about
they were talking
moving
about
that
moving
one.
it.
Yeah.
The one on the east side?
The one on the east side, they wanted to talk
So we
about
could certainly
moving
Right.
it.
probably quote or price that out for them
Right.
as well. So.
Certainly. We
Yeah.
could take a look. We have, you'd certainly want to get us somebody with a structural background to take
Yeah.
a look at it and let us know the viability of moving that structure.
If you moved it, would it crumble, that kind of
Correct.
thing?
Right.
Or is it
Yep.
better just to take it down and leave the one? I don't know. We'll
Or
let
you
the
might have to
engineers-
move it in sections, whatever. Yeah.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah. I did drive by the other day, too, and I was somewhat surprised that it's as long as
Yeah.
they are. I was visualizing just
Smaller.
two
Pillars.
kind of. So, anyhow.
So,
All right.
There you go. Quick HR update. So we had our final interviews for the police officer position on Thursday, January 23. We had 3 final candidates, and they're all excellent. So I kind of feel like we didn't lose. We did decide on somebody, so we have advanced that person into the background phase, and so we'll keep working on that. And as we get a little closer to the actual hire, we'll be bringing something back for the council to consider. The director of administration position, we finally got through the initial interviews. We had some on the 15th and had to move the ones that were originally scheduled on the 17th to the 24th. That canceled our original final interview date. The new final interview day is actually this Wednesday, and we actually have 2 people that we're advancing in that process. So I think they're both really good candidates. So we'll be doing those final interviews this Wednesday morning. I will distribute a revised work session schedule. And Kris, I think I sent one to you, but if not, I can give you another copy. So, Mayor and Council, if you want to grab that. We don't need to review this other than the fact that I took the comments I got prior to the last meeting and tried to incorporate all the comments into the schedule. We had the luxury of already having the January 21 and tonight's meeting in the queue and ready. So as you can see, the next meeting on the 18th, again, is a Tuesday. We got a couple items there, the roads 2021. We probably also got to touch on some of the 2020 stuff that we still have to make a few decisions on. The Lyle Park Picnic Shelter. The 2 and Monday are colored as they are because those are the 2nd and 4th Mondays and not the 1st and 3rd. We're going to do a strategic plan update. I don't have a time yet for that early start yet, but I will as I work through it and figure out how long that I believe it's going to take to do the update on the strategic plan. It's the 2nd year of the 2-year plan, so I don't think it's going to be a lot, but there's going to be some other things that go into it. We got the boulevard right-of-way tree policy, the storm and tree debris policy on the 23rd of March, and then as you can see the rest, nuisance ordinance, swamp, the recycling contract. Probably bring back the strategic plan for a final update and approval. We're going to talk about fee schedules was requested, and then there's a couple that Councilmember Bruce brought up, a finance subcommittee and some technology discussion, and we've got those scheduled for June. So we're going with that until something changes, which always seems to happen. But I hope not. And then the final item I have is that we have set the date for the State of the City. It's on Wednesday, April 15th. It will be held here at the City Council chambers at 7 p.m. And so we publicized that date. So with that, those are all the items I have for the council tonight.
Any other staff reports? Okay. Well, do council reports. Maybe I'll start this time. I had a list, and I attended a number of meetings. One of the things I attended was a leadership conference on Friday and Saturday of last week. Well attended. It was really a great conference, and also just good, as well as all of the work sessions and workshops. Good opportunity to connect with fellow leaders of other communities. Also, I attended it was a state committee, the Clean Energy Committee meeting. Senator Osmick is the chair of that, and he hosted it actually at the West Tonka School District, and it was and invited the public to come in and not participate, but some public participation, but basically to observe, and it was very interesting. So I did attend that. We will have a personnel committee meeting on Wednesday to do some interviews, so I'll be attending that. And then also Representative Phillips held a breakfast meeting, as he has. He does these quarterly for all of the mayors within his district. Was able to attend that as well. So that's it.
I am attending the Personnel Committee meeting on the 5th, and also the WCC meeting is next week, the 13th.
No updates to report.
No updates.
Okay.
I'll be attending the Mound Fire Advisory meeting on February 11th. It was rescheduled. Or 12th, sorry.
February 12th.
Yep. And I also attended the Clean Energy First Senate committee meeting, and that was very interesting. And I also I volunteered for the polar plunge and got to see our fire department, the Mound Fire Department, plunge into the water along with their wives, and they raised, I think their goal was $40,000, and they came pretty close. I think it was like $38,000 is what they raised. So
Didn't go in yourself?
no.
No. I got asked to go in. I said,
No, you can toss a chicken in and everybody will clap for your chicken.
that would be me.
All right. So with that, we can adjourn if we are finished. I think we are. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay. The motion was made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Ms. Mortenson. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Okay, it is 6:45, so I'm going to call the February 3rd, EDA meeting to order. And so our first order of business is introductions. Do we have to do introductions?
You don't really.
Okay. We kind of know who's here. Do we need to do introductions?
No.
Okay.
And if you do, you're not wearing your council hats, you're wearing your commissioner hats.
Right.
I can see them right there.
Yes, right. So I guess the first thing is to approve the minutes from February 4th, 2019, which was a year ago.
Approve the agenda first.
Okay,
please.
I'm sorry. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. Any additions or changes or discussion regarding the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Tschumperlin made that motion and Ms. Mortenson seconded that. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So next we move on to approval of the minutes from February 4th, 2019. If you can all remember way back then, although it wasn't a very difficult meeting, I don't believe. Are there any changes to the minutes as presented? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented in our packet?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made by Ms. Bruce and seconded by Mr. Tschumperlin. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. So next we go on election of officers. So currently the president is myself, the vice president is Councilmember Ms. Mortenson, the secretary is Ms. Bruce, the treasurer is Mr. Molitor, and the assistant treasurer is Finance Director Grimm, and I know Mr. Barone had, and the executive director is Mr.
That's item B.
Okay, so you want that separate. All right. Do you want to make any changes to the appointments? It's a really difficult job. So if none, is there a motion to make the same appointments or to maintain the same appointments as they currently are?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to maintain the appointments as they currently are. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. So the president will remain myself, Vice President Pam Mortenson, Secretary Ms. Bruce, Treasurer Mr. Molitor, and Assistant Treasurer Brian Grimm. So the next is appointment of the Executive Director. And last year we appointed Mike Barone as the Executive Director. Are there any other suggestions, or do you want to keep it the same?
I motion to keep it the same.
All right. Motion was made by Mr. Molitor and seconded by Ms. Mortenson. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed. Motion passes.
The pay is phenomenal.
I know. So we next adopting the report to the City Council regarding enabling resolution. I don't believe there's any changes.
Madam President, no, the staff's recommending that there be no changes.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion then to adopting the EDA Resolution 01-19, which is adopting the report to the City Council regarding enabling resolution?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Is that 01-2020?
That was 20, not 19.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, here it says 19. Okay, is motion, I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, and
I'll second.
okay, Mr. Tschumperlin made the second. Any other question? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. And then we have to adopt the budget. This is going to be a long discussion because it's a big budget. Is there a motion to adopt the budget? As you saw, there is really no budget.
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Molitor made that and Ms. Bruce seconded that. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. And then adopt the report to the City Council regarding the MEDA activities. Again, other than this meeting, there really were no activities for 2019. Is there a motion to adopt the report to the City Council with no activities having taken place other than the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Tschumperlin made that motion and Ms. Bruce seconded. Any further questions? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Are there any discussion items? Okay, hearing none. Any administrative items? Date of our next annual meeting would be February
1st, 2021.
Okay, February 1st, 2021. I'm assuming also at 6:45?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay. So, and is there a motion then to set the next ED annual meeting for February 1st, 2021?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. And that would conclude our agenda, I believe. Otherwise, so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. All right. So we have about a 8-minute break.